What I wish I knew at 12 instead of 22. The Cuban Missile Crisis explained in a nutshell. October 1962, folks. The US and the Soviet Union were like two kids on the playground, ready to throw punches. Whoa. The Soviets secretly placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from Florida. Talk about nerve-wracking. President Kennedy saw this as a major threat. He went on TV and said, "Hey, Khrushchev, get those missiles out of there." But he said it in a much more presidential way. Anyway, the world was on the edge of its seat. Would this start World War III? JFK decided to block Soviet ships from bringing more missiles to Cuba. Imagine a giant no-entry sign in the ocean, as tensions were high, but neither side wanted to blink first. The world held its breath for 13 days now. Would we dodge a nuclear bullet? Finally, a deal was struck. So the Soviets agreed to remove the missiles, and the US secretly promised to remove their missiles from Turkey. Phew! Crisis averted. So next time you hear about the Cuban Missile Crisis, remember we were close to disaster. But diplomacy and cool heads saved the day. History's wild, huh? Catch you next time. Now let's dive a bit deeper into the events that led to this intense standoff. The roots of the Cuban Missile Crisis can be traced back to the Cold War, a period of geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both superpowers were engaged in an arms race, each trying to outdo the other in terms of nuclear capabilities. This rivalry extended to various parts of the world, including Cuba. Cuba, under the leadership of Fidel Castro, had recently become a communist state and aligned itself with the Soviet Union. This was a significant concern for the United States, as it meant a communist ally was now just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. The US had already attempted to overthrow Castro's government in the failed Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961, which only pushed Cuba closer to the Soviet Union. The discovery of Soviet missiles in Cuba in October 1962 was a game-changer. These missiles had the capability to strike major cities in the United States within minutes, drastically altering the balance of power. President Kennedy and his advisors had to act quickly and decisively to address this threat. After intense deliberations, Kennedy decided on a naval blockade, which he termed a quarantine, to prevent further Soviet shipments of military equipment to Cuba. This move was risky, as it could have been perceived as an act of war by the Soviet Union. However, it also bought time for diplomatic negotiation. The world watched anxiously as Soviet ships approached the blockade line. Would they turn back or force a confrontation? Fortunately, the Soviet ships stopped short of the blockade and a tense standoff ensued. Behind the scenes, intense negotiations were taking place between the US and Soviet leaders. Finally, after 13 nerve-wracking days, a deal was reached. The Soviets agreed to dismantle their missiles in Cuba, and the US secretly agreed to remove its missiles from Turkey. This resolution not only averted a potential nuclear war, but also marked a turning point in the Cold War, leading to improved communication between the superpowers. The Cuban Missile Crisis remains one of the most dramatic and significant events of the 20th century. It serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of diplomacy, communication, and the willingness to compromise in the face of potential disaster. So, the next time you hear about the Cuban Missile Crisis, remember the lessons it taught us about the delicate balance of power and the need for cool heads in times of crisis. History truly is wild, and there's always more to learn. Catch you next time.